The courtroom was supposed to be a place of order, of solemnity, rules, and rituals, but the moment Judge Harold Bennett's voice lashed through the chamber, all sense of calm evaporated. "You will not disrespect this courtroom with your unprofessional clothes," he barked, his tone cutting like glass. Silence followed, deep and immediate. Every eye in the room shifted to the woman standing at the witness stand, a figure that did not fit the expected mold. She wore blue hospital scrubs. No blazer, no pressed skirt or polished shoes, just the unmistakable uniform of someone who belonged in an ICU, not on a witness stand. Emily Carter stood frozen beneath the weight of the judge's glare. Her hands trembled, just slightly, betraying the strength she was trying to summon. She wasn't here for herself, and that's what she kept reminding herself. Her voice wasn't supposed to matter today, only the truth did. But now, with every whisper in the gallery and every skeptical glance from the defense table, she felt as if her credibility was unraveling before she'd even spoken. Judge Bennett leaned forward, his knuckles pale against the polished wood of the bench. "Miss Carter, are you aware this is a courtroom, not a hospital trauma bay?" A cruel ripple of laughter moved through the audience like a tide. Emily's face flushed, but she didn't look away. She couldn't afford to. Not with Miguel's mother sitting there, watching her with desperate eyes. Not when she was the only one willing to speak the truth. Her mind flickered back to the chaos of the ICU just hours earlier, the smell of antiseptic, the beep of monitors, Miguel's small, broken body. She hadn't even had time to wash the blood off her sleeve. The image hit her chest like a hammer, and suddenly, her embarrassment gave way to something sharper, resolve. The prosecutor tried to intervene, his voice measured but urgent. "Your Honor, Miss Carter is a key witness. She came straight from the hospital. She should have dressed like a witness," the judge snapped before he could finish. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Emily could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the courtroom closing in around her like a vice. The defendant sat with an amused smirk, as if the universe had handed him an unexpected gift. The judge was distracted, the witness humiliated, and maybe, just maybe, the truth would slip through the cracks. Then came the moment. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. But something inside her snapped, not in anger, but in conviction. She stood a little taller. Her voice, when it came, was calm, but carried an edge honed by years of standing between life and death. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, each word clear and steady, "no." The gasp that followed was audible. The judge raised an eyebrow, more shocked than outraged now. Emily slowly raised her arm and showed the blood on her sleeve. "This isn't just fabric. This is Miguel's blood. He's 7 years old. He was hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. I was the one who stabilized him. I held his hand while he screamed for his mother." The silence returned, but now it was charged with something new. A weight hung in the air, heavy and raw. Emily turned to face the gallery. Her voice didn't shake this time. "I didn't have time to change, because I chose to be here. I chose to show up. I chose to speak the truth. That is what respect looks like." For a moment, no one moved. The judge didn't speak. Even the defendant had lost his grin. It was only the beginning of what Emily had to say, but in that suspended breath of silence, the balance in the room shifted. Not by force, not by law, but by the sheer power of truth spoken without apology. Emily Carter had never thought of herself as brave. She was a nurse, not a warrior. Her battles were fought under fluorescent lights, in sterile rooms that reeked of alcohol and adrenaline. She had stitched flesh, cracked ribs, reset bones, and held hearts, both literal and metaphorical, in her hands. But none of that had ever made her feel powerful. It had only made her necessary. Born in a working-class suburb, Emily had grown up watching her mother juggle night shifts and unpaid bills, while her father's absence carved out a silent ache no one talked about. Responsibility had been thrust on her early. By 12, she was caring for her little brother like a second mother. By 16, she knew what it meant to sacrifice your own needs for someone else's survival. Empathy wasn't something she learned in medical training. It was etched into her bones. When she entered nursing, it wasn't out of ambition, it was instinct. A calling. A quiet, relentless desire to make pain bearable, even when it couldn't be fixed. Trauma nursing, in particular, became her arena. It wasn't just the pace or the pressure, it was the raw, unfiltered humanity. People didn't lie when they were bleeding out. They didn't pretend. They just wanted someone to fight for them when they couldn't fight for themselves. Emily became that someone. She didn't wear her achievements like armor, there were no framed certificates in her living room, no self-congratulatory social media posts. But those she treated remembered her. The mother whose baby she revived after a car crash. The elderly man who whispered thank you with his last breath. The teenager who bled all over her uniform and later sent her a drawing from rehab. She carried their stories quietly, like folded notes in her pocket. And yet, for all her strength in the ER, the courtroom had shaken her. It wasn't the judge's scolding or the laughter of strangers that unsettled her, it was the feeling of being invisible again. Of being misunderstood. As if the very uniform that had come to symbolize life and sacrifice had been reduced to unprofessional attire. That day, she hadn't even planned to testify. She had given her written statement, thinking it would be enough. But when she overheard that Miguel's truth was being distorted, that the man who broke his body might escape accountability, something ancient stirred inside her. The same instinct that drove her to stay on shift even when she was sick. The same voice that once told her to walk into a house where screams came from behind a locked door. She had to go. She had to speak. Emily didn't have children of her own. A failed engagement years ago had left her wary of promises that came too easily. Her life had become the hospital, her colleagues a makeshift family, the patients a revolving reminder of what it meant to love without guarantees. But Miguel had become something different. He had looked at her with wide, terrified eyes and trusted her with his pain. He had clung to her fingers like a lifeline while his small body trembled in the trauma bay. She had left the hospital with blood still on her sleeve because some truths couldn't wait for clean clothes. She hadn't anticipated the confrontation. But she had walked into that courtroom anyway, heart pounding, posture straight, the smell of antiseptic still lingering on her. And when she had spoken, when she had told the judge, the jury, the room full of strangers why she had come, she hadn't just been defending Miguel. She had been defending every invisible act of care that people like her performed in silence every single day. She had been defending herself. Emily Carter had never thought of herself as brave. But on that day, when her voice cracked the silence of a courtroom, she became more than a nurse. She became the pulse of truth. The moment Emily stepped into the courtroom, a chill ran through her, not from the air conditioning, but from the weight of unfamiliar eyes and silence that followed her footsteps. She had arrived just in time, her shoes still sticky with hallway dust from the ICU, the sharp scent of antiseptic clinging to her skin. Her blue scrubs, marked with dried streaks of blood and sweat, stood out like a flag of contradiction against the polished wood and stiff suits. But she didn't hesitate. Miguel needed her. The truth needed her. She barely made it to the witness stand before the judge's voice sliced through the room. "You will not disrespect this courtroom with your unprofessional clothes," Judge Harold Bennett barked, each word landing like a slap. The sound echoed, silencing whispers, even breath. Emily froze for a heartbeat, the accusation crashing against her chest like a wave. She was trained to respond to chaos, not to cruelty disguised as decorum. Her fingers curled around the edge of the stand. Her ears buzzed. Her name, Emily Carter, echoed in the judge's voice as though it didn't belong to her. She felt, for the first time in years, like that little girl again, unwelcome, misunderstood, unseen. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Miss Carter, are you aware this is a courtroom, not an emergency room?" His tone was loaded with mockery, as if her presence was a disruption, not a contribution. A ripple of laughter scattered from the gallery. It was quiet but cruel, sharp and dismissive. Emily's cheeks burned. Not from shame, but from the deep, cutting injustice of it. She hadn't come here for herself. She didn't want applause or attention. She had rushed from a trauma unit where life clung to a thread, where Miguel's blood had soaked into the fabric of her uniform while she fought to keep his heart beating. The prosecutor began to speak, his voice measured but urgent. Your Honor, Miss Carter is a critical witness. She came here directly from the hospital. She should have dressed like one. The judge cut him off coldly. This is a place of respect. Respect. The word hung heavy in the air, twisted and weaponized. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. What did this man know of respect? Had he ever held a dying child's hand? Had he ever fought to preserve a life that was slipping away second by second? She thought of Miguel's mother, crying quietly in the front row. She thought of Miguel's tiny, broken body in the ICU, the machines clicking like fragile promises. She thought of the defendant's smug grin, his suit crisp, his lies carefully tailored. Emily had expected resistance. But she hadn't expected to be humiliated, not like this, not by the very system that was supposed to protect the truth. The judge's words weren't just about clothing. They were about status, image, control. They were about who had the right to speak and be believed. The judge sighed. We'll take a recess so the witness can change into something appropriate. The word recess felt like surrender. Like erasure. Emily could feel the courtroom closing in around her, the stares, the judgment, the heavy silence that followed insult. But then, something within her shifted. It was quiet, at first. A whisper of defiance born not from ego, but from pain. From purpose. From every moment she had sacrificed without thanks or recognition. From every night she had spent in blood-soaked shoes holding the line between life and death. She straightened her spine. She would not be dismissed. She would not be made small. And as her voice rose above the silence, she wasn't just speaking to the judge. She was speaking to every person who had ever been silenced, overlooked, disrespected for choosing compassion over convention. She was speaking for Miguel. Emily stood motionless for a beat, her heart thudding like distant thunder in her chest. The judge's words still hung in the air, a cold command laced with dismissal: go change. Leave the stand. Erase yourself. It was the final push, and something deep inside her, a fragile, flickering light she had protected for years, finally caught fire. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. The courtroom was still. The defendant leaned back in his chair, smirking, confident that her silence meant defeat. Behind him, the expensive lawyer scribbled something on a notepad, oblivious. Miguel's mother, crumpled with grief in the front row, looked up just as Emily took a slow breath and raised her voice, clear, unshaking, and rich with restrained fury. With all due respect, Your Honor, no. The room gasped. Even the court reporter's fingers paused above the keys. Emily's own voice echoed in her ears, but she didn't waver. Her hand moved instinctively to the dried blood on her sleeve. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with unbearable truth. This, she said, holding her arm high, is Miguel's blood. No one moved. No one dared. I didn't stop to change because I was holding a child's chest together with my hands while we waited for the trauma surgeon. I didn't stop to look in a mirror or iron a blouse. I came here because I was the only one who saw that man. She pointed directly at the defendant, whose smirk was gone now, his posture stiffening, blow through a red light and nearly kill a little boy. The judge opened his mouth, but Emily cut him off, not rudely, but with the force of a wave that cannot be stopped. You want to talk about respect? She said, her voice tightening with emotion. Respect is staying up for 36 hours straight because there aren't enough nurses to cover the ER. Respect is holding a child's hand while he whispers that he doesn't want to die. Respect is showing up, bloody, exhausted, heartbroken, because the truth matters more than appearances. Her voice broke there, just slightly, and for a moment she faltered. But then she saw Miguel's mother, her eyes wide with tears, nodding slowly, as if to say, "Keep going." Emily stood straighter. "You asked me to leave, Your Honor. To change. But I won't. Because these scrubs may not be clean, but they are honest. They're real. And that little boy, he deserves real. He deserves someone to speak for him, someone who won't change just to make the truth more comfortable." Silence stretched. Long, dense. Not the silence of judgment, but the kind that comes right before something shifts. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her hands trembling slightly, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. And then, one clap. Miguel's mother. Soft. Measured. Then another, louder. A juror. And then the room erupted into applause. Not the polite kind reserved for ceremony, but something raw. Something grateful. It rolled through the room like a cleansing wind, rising in waves. People stood. Even the bailiff, normally stoic, gave a small, respectful nod. Emily didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, breathing in the silence that followed the thunder, knowing that for once, just once, truth had not been silenced by power. Judge Bennett, his gavel still raised, looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Slowly, he lowered the gavel, leaned back in his chair, and gave a quiet, almost reluctant nod. "Proceed, Miss Carter." And just like that, she had turned the courtroom from a place of fear into a place of truth. Not with credentials. Not with a suit. But with courage. Emily's voice still lingered in the heavy silence as she took her seat, the weight of her defiance settling around her like a shield. The courtroom was no longer just a place of cold formality, it had transformed into a crucible where truth and courage collided. The judge's stern gaze softened, but the tension remained, thick and palpable. Then, slowly at first, a single hand rose. Miguel's mother, her tears now a river of gratitude and hope, began to clap. Her applause was quiet, trembling, a fragile bridge from sorrow to strength. It was an unspoken thank you, a recognition that Emily's stand was more than just words, it was the raw, painful embodiment of love and sacrifice. The room caught the cue. Another pair of hands joined in, tentative at first, then a ripple of applause spread like wildfire. Jurors, spectators, even the bailiff, usually a silent sentinel of order, now gave a solemn nod as they clapped. The sound swelled, filling every corner of the chamber, echoing against the wood-paneled walls. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, a fierce, steady drumbeat that matched the rhythm of the applause. It was not just an acknowledgement of her bravery, it was a collective release, a catharsis for everyone who had felt powerless in the face of injustice. The defendant's smug expression vanished, replaced by a shadow of unease, as the truth crystallized in the eyes of all present. Her mind raced, not with fear, but with clarity. This moment, the noise, the recognition, was a reminder that real respect is earned through actions, not appearances, through standing firm when it's easier to bend or break. The clapping was a chorus of empathy, a declaration that courage, no matter how dressed, commands honor. As the last echoes faded, the judge cleared his throat, his voice quieter now, tinged with reluctant respect. "Proceed, Miss Carter." And with that, the room returned to order, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Emily knew she had broken through more than protocol, she had pierced through the veil of indifference. In that courtroom, amidst the clapping and whispers, truth had found its voice, and Emily was its fierce, unyielding bearer. Emily stepped down from the witness stand with a quiet resolve, her scrubs still bearing the marks of the night's battle. The courtroom, once rigid and cold, now held a fragile warmth, a space where truth no longer feared exposure. As she walked back to her seat, she felt the weight of every eye on her, not with judgment, but with something closer to understanding. Her testimony unfolded with steady clarity, each word carefully measured but laden with the urgency of what she had witnessed. She described the shattered bones, the frightened eyes of young Miguel, the reckless disregard of the defendant who had caused this pain. The details were raw, painful, but necessary, a mosaic of reality that no lie could obscure. With every answer, the defendant's earlier arrogance seemed to wither, replaced by a growing unease. The courtroom sensed it too, the invisible threads of deception were unraveling before them. Emily's voice did more than recount facts, it carried the emotional weight of a witness who had been at the edge of life and death, who had held hope in her hands even when it felt impossible. Miguel's mother wiped her tears quietly, her gaze fixed on Emily as if drawing strength from her courage. The jurors exchanged looks, their faces reflecting the dawning clarity that comes with undeniable truth. The judge, once so quick to dismiss Emily for her attire, now listened intently, the furrow in his brow softening. When Emily finished, a heavy silence settled briefly before the first murmurs of acknowledgement began to ripple through the room. The stark reality of the case had been laid bare, not through polished suits or rehearsed speeches, but through the unvarnished truth told by a woman who had chosen honor over convention. As the proceedings moved forward, Emily understood something profound: respect is not granted by protocol or appearance, but earned through the courage to speak up, to stand firm, and to seek justice in the face of adversity. The courtroom had witnessed more than a testimony, it had witnessed a quiet revolution of integrity. And in that moment, Emily's role was no longer just that of a nurse or a witness, she was the living embodiment of truth's unwavering light, guiding justice toward its rightful course. In the stillness that followed the courtroom's applause, a deeper truth lingered in the air, one that transcended the immediate drama of the trial. Emily's courage had revealed something essential about the nature of respect, honor, and justice, challenging everyone present to reconsider their own assumptions and biases. It wasn't about polished appearances or rigid formalities, it was about integrity, empathy, and the willingness to stand for what is right, even when the world demands conformity and silence. Her scrubs, stained with the blood of a child fighting for his life, became a symbol, a silent testament to the unseen battles fought by those who serve in the shadows. It reminded everyone that real respect is earned not by superficial gestures but by the sacrifices made in moments of crisis, by the unwavering commitment to truth when it is hardest to speak. The judge's initial disdain, the murmurs of the courtroom, the smugness of the defendant, all were swept away by the undeniable power of Emily's presence and voice. This moment was a call to the conscience, a challenge to look beyond the surface and recognize the humanity in each person's story. It asked the courtroom, and by extension, society, to honor courage over convention, to value substance over appearance. Emily's defiance was not just a personal victory, it was a profound reminder that justice must be served with compassion, and that sometimes, the greatest battles for dignity and truth happen quietly, in scrubs stained with the evidence of life and struggle. In that courtroom, the meaning of respect was rewritten, not by words alone, but by the brave act of standing tall when everything seemed to demand submission. And as the echoes of applause faded, what remained was a lasting message: true honor lies in the courage to face the hard truths and to fight for them, no matter the cost.